Tell me about the game, How Many Are Hiding?
Well, the game is actually very simple. You have a child or a few children, you can have maybe three, and you ask them to set out exactly 5 counters, so they're doing that. And at some point, when they're all set with that, you cover up some of them. You have them close their eyes, and you cover up some of them. And you say, how many are hidden? And you can take turns. I mean, once the kids know what the game is, they can tell you to close your eyes, or the other kids to close their eyes. They cover up some. That's the game.
And what can kids learn along the way, or what can you learn about the kids?
Well, first of all, if you're a little loose about the instructions, letting the kids, I mean, not diving into the end of the game too quickly. The kids counting out these in the first place, you'll find out whether they can count them, whether they can count what they do see rather than what they don't see, which is the ultimate game. And you'll find out how they do it and how securely they do it and whether they redo it or recheck it. And when I play the game with kids, I actually often ask, so how many did you say they were? As if I'm genuinely curious. And they might just say, I mean, I didn't ask them to count again. They might just say 5. But typically little ones, and especially in preschool, will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and do it again. So you're seeing a lot about whether they know, having counted out 5, that there are 5, or whether they recheck it, or whether they look at you and wonder why you can't remember.
And the colors, does that have an influence over, you laid out 3 red and then 2 yellow up.
Yeah, actually, kids will often ask, do you want them red or do you want them yellow? And I will say it doesn't matter. They typically pick something. I just put out 5. Often when you're, if they're in 2 colors, then when you cover, it's a little actually easier for the kids to remember, because they have a visual picture of this thing, what gets covered. Because there are fewer reds and fewer yellows. Okay, we're missing 1 yellow. There's at least 1 down there. But it doesn't really matter to the game. That's what happens along the way, or you can play with that if you want. Also, by the way, if you play the game and deliberately don't cover any, the kids will find that funny. Or if you cover them all, the kids will find that funny. This is even funnier. And their responses tend to be very funny, like, all of them, they're all gone, rather than a number.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you tend to see with kids when they're playing this game? Like, what are some of the things that are challenging for them, or confusing to them, or some of the things teachers should be on the lookout for?
Well, first of all, actually, counting is pretty complicated. I mean, it's so natural for us that we don't see all the things behind it. So some children will not know number names in order. We worked with a child who you perfectly well knew that when counting you said number words. We didn't say 1, 2, blue. But he said, if I'm remembering correctly, one of his sequences was 1, 3, 4, 8, 7, 8, 9. And that's, you can't count if you're doing that. But another thing, even if you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it isn't with them. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Children will tend to be smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have to match them up. Another thing is, for the child who does successfully get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, knowing that that means there are 5 of them. So that's not just an action, it's a conclusion as well. And many children, when you ask for, so how many did you say there were? Will repeat the action rather than say 5. well, it's interesting if you watch them. They'll sometimes spontaneously say things like, there were 5. When if you asked, they would repeat the counting. I don't know what that means, and it depends on the child as to what that means, whether they are thinking that how many means you should count, whereas they actually already know the number.
Where would you go with next steps for kids when you were playing this game with them?
Well, obviously, it depends on where the next step is. With the little boy who was getting the numbers in just wild order, I mean, they didn't seem to be consistent. It wasn't he didn't have one order, even one wrong order. What I often did with what I did with him, first of all, is had him count his fingers. Mostly as just another act of counting. I asked him how old he was. He said 5. He then counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, which was really interesting because he wasn't usually getting them in sequence. He was the same one who did 1, 3, and repeated something 4, 8, some very wild set of numbers. So it looks like maybe he even had more of a sequence when counting his fingers than when counting objects, but I don't know. So we went, I think you are 5 and you skipped 5. You can't skip 5. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just the repetition. At that point, for that child, it's just a piece of poetry. Those words, after all, they aren't the same words in French, and they aren't the same words in, Mandarin, but it's learning a piece of poetry so that you can recite the poetry when you're actually doing something important like counting. There was another child, Mike, who I think was playing with me, and I asked him to set out, and he set out 5 like this, and I said, so? I'm sorry, he set it out, and he said, so is that 5? I said, oh, okay, check it out. And he counted perfectly competently, and he said, oh, no, that's 4. And I said, okay, fix it. He was about to destroy it. And I said, okay, fix it. And he picked up a piece like this, and then before he put it down, he picked up another piece. I don't know, but I think he knew what was the right fix, because he was very good at the counting. And then he went, that's amazing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he knew he had to get to the end. He wanted 5, but he also knew that he had 6. For him, again, I don't know whether he didn't know or whether he was just playing with me, which children will often do, and it can masquerade knowledge that they have. But just playing the game made it, he got there, and then we moved on.